Helps. Yeah, good evening, members, and hello, we've got somebody with a computer on, have we? Sound. So, good evening, members, and good evening, members of the public who are watching this evening on the live stream. My name is Councillor Steve Bartlett, and I'm the chairman of this BCP Overview and Scrutiny Board. We have a lot of officers here this evening, and I think it's unusually, but I will tonight on this occasion, because we have so many officers, ask them to introduce themselves, and I'll also ask everybody else to introduce themselves as well. So I've already introduced myself. If we go around through Claire first, and then work our way around the room. Thank you, Claire.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll introduce myself. I'm Claire Johnston. Claire Johnston, Democratic Services Officer, supporting the ONS board. I'll very quickly do the housekeeping notice before I pass on, if that's okay. Please note that this Overview and Scrutiny Board is being recorded by the Council for live broadcast and will be published on the Council website for a minimum of 6 months. The meeting may also be recorded or streamed for live or subsequent broadcast by members of the public. For those in the room, please note that if the fire alarm sounds, please exit the building by way of the nearest available signed fire exit route and make your way to the car park at the front of the building. Finally, please could everyone ensure that background noise is kept to a minimum and that mobile phones and other devices are turned off or switched to a silent setting for the duration of the meeting. For those in the room, this includes turning off microphones and turning the volume down completely on laptops. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Janie Berry. I'm the Council's Director of Law and Governance and Monitoring Officer.
Ian O'Donnell, I'm the Interim Corporate Director of Resources.
Isla Reynolds, Director of Marketing, Communications and Policy.
Hello, I'm Nigel Stannard. I'm Head of Audit and Management Assurance, and I'm mainly here for agenda item 7, which is the governance review of the shareholder agreement.
Hello, Matthew Ransett, Director of Customer Arts and Property.
Hello, I'm Vicky Edmonds. I'm a Policy Officer from Policy, Sustainability and Inclusion.
Councillor Michael Tarling for Christchurch Town.
Tony Trent for Old Newbourne Valley.
Sue Aikenhead, Poole Town.
Councillor Bobby Dudley, Thistledown and Ickford.
I'm Councillor Kate Salmon for Moordown.
Councillor Jeff Hanna, Cabinet Member for Transformation, here for item 7.
Councillor Crispin Goodall, Parkstone.
Paul Hilliard, Councillor for Muddyford, West Highcliffe and Christchurch.
Councillor Oliver Walters for Penhill.
Councillor Sandra Moore, Camford Heath.
And Graham Farrant, Chief Executive. Thank you. We didn't leave you to last on purpose, Chief Executive. And I noticed that Leader of the Council, Vicky Slade, has just walked in. She's at the back of the room. So welcome to everybody. So let's get on to, we've done the housekeeping notice. Let's go on to agenda item 1. Yeah, I beg your pardon. We do have some people online, and well, would you like to introduce yourself? Certainly, Councillor Rice is there online, who is a member of the committee, but not in the room tonight. Good evening, Councillor Rice.
Hello. Yeah, Councillor Rice, Oakdale Ward. Thank you. And
we have Lindsay Marshall there. Do you want to introduce yourself, Lindsay?
Thank you. Yes, thanks, Chairman. I'm Lindsay Marshall. I'm the Overview and Scrutiny Specialist. So I would normally be there, and apologies, I'm not. I'm at the tail end of COVID, so I won't pass it on to you all at this New Year stage, but I'm presenting the report at the end, and I'll be here throughout the meeting.
Thank you. We have Gillian there.
Hi, Gillian Kay, Corporate Director for Wellbeing. Apologies, I'm strangely backlit. I'll try and fix that in case I do need to come in at any point.
Thank you. And Jess Gibbons, our COO.
Yeah, Jess Gibbons, Chief Operations Officer.
Thank you very much. Okay, so we've got everybody now, I think. Thank you. So agenda item 1, apologies.
Thanks, Chair. Yes, we've received apologies for this meeting from Councillors Leslie Dedman and Councillor Lisa Northover. Also apologies from Councillor Philip Broadhead, who should be joining us later on this evening. And we also have a substitute member, which is Councillor Hilliard for Councillor Dedman.
Thank you. Agenda item 3, declarations of interest. Do any councillors have any disclosable pecuniary interest or any other interest on any item on the agenda? Councillor Tarling?
Yeah, my wife works for the council and the library service. Therefore, if there's something, I will stand down from voting if there's a vote against anything on that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other members? No. Okay, thank you. Confirmation of minutes. We have minutes both from the 13th of November and the 4th of December. I'll take the 13th November minutes first. Does anybody have any changes or disagreements with the minutes for the 13th of November meeting? No, okay, we'll accept those as they are. The 4th of December minutes. That's the trend.
Yes, Chairman, I think I emailed on this, but just in case I didn't. In the minutes of the discussion about the traveller sites, when I read it, it seemed to me to be mixing up the settled traveller site that was being talked about with the travelling site, and I kind of read it as mixing the two together, so that you could almost, if you wanted to, read into it that the settled traveller site, the 21 dwellings, could actually be a mobile site. It was just a lack of clarity in it. As I say, I think I emailed about it, but I'm not 100% sure because I've been doing a lot of things over the last few days. And
okay, I've not. Who did you email?
Right, I think I would have emailed the clerk, but
I don't recall seeing anything myself.
no, yeah, it was just in the wording of it. I'll see if I can.
Seen anything, but if it would be helpful, I could add a note to these minutes just to clarify that, so that there is a clarification.
Yeah, because the discussion was about the proposal for 21 settled sites,
yes,
but the subject of the other site, you know, the other kind of site was mentioned, and I think the wording seemed to conflate the two a little bit.
Okay, can we leave it for the clerk to ensure there's no confusion in the way that the minutes reflect the discussion? And I'm sure that Claire will discuss it with you to see if there is any.
Yeah, because I would hate for people to confuse the two.
Okay, perhaps if you just copy me into it. Okay, thank you. Agenda item 5, public issues. Do you have any public issues?
No, there's no public issues for this meeting, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Okay, brings us on to agenda item 6, the corporate performance report. The corporate performance report obviously aligns to, I think we've got the leader is going to come in for this item, but really summarises the performance against an agreed strategy. But of course it is looking backwards now at what's happened in the past. It's not looking forward, and I understand the corporate plan will be changing, or it's in the process of being changed. So to a point, we're looking backwards in time now. I'll say no more about that. I'll ask the leader, Councillor Slade, to introduce it. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, very briefly, you are absolutely right. This paper went to Cabinet last month and got quite a long discussion. A lot of the detail around the areas where there are exceptions, areas where really good work has been done. But it is the Q2 performance report, so it's looking at the sort of summer period, and it is, as you say, based upon the previous corporate strategy, combined with the delivery plans that were put in place under the previous administration. We have tomorrow we will be hopefully taking the new corporate strategy through to adoption, which means that the team in policy and performance are able to then start working on the delivery plans. And the intention is that the new delivery plans against the new corporate strategy will come into play from the new civic year. And we're very keen to make sure that the performance measures make sense. There are an awful lot of rather random performance measures, and there are other things which I think there is a feeling we should be recording our performance against that we don't. So although this has already been adopted through the cabinet, I think there is an opportunity, if there are areas that people think we aren't measuring performance, this is a great opportunity to reflect that back so that we can discuss that, and as we go forward with the new delivery models, be sort of ahead of the game. Because I know I always felt when I was scrutinising that I didn't feel I was scrutinising the right things. The other thing that the other area that this paper does look at is an update on the best value notice, which we know will be in place for at least a year. And you'll see that the vast majority of the measures that are covered by the best value notice and that action plan. Two parts. You've got the action plan that was put in place as a direct result of the review by DLUC, and the action plan put in place based on the review by the chief executive. There are some areas that are not yet completed or not yet underway, and that's either because they're relating to governance. Obviously, we've got a paper after this on the company governance, and areas that are linked to the work of the monitoring officer, who of course has only been in place for a few weeks, and other areas that specifically relate to children's, which are obviously scrutinised through children's, but also we're slightly at the mercy of that process as well. So it's not really something that we can drive forward at a different pace. But I'm very happy to take any questions. And the one thing I really must stress is the work that was done by the team to actually upgrade the work on this corporate strategy, and then the performance reports over the last few months has been really, really good. You know, for them to push through that new corporate strategy was great, but also recognising the dissatisfaction with some of the way that departments had sort of paid a bit of lip service to some of the responses. It's like, yeah, we've achieved that because we've done one thing. And it's like, well, actually, you know, how can you say you've achieved your green targets because you did one thing that was green? Unless it's substantive, we really shouldn't be marking things as green. And there's been a really good response from Sophie and the team to hearing what members have said on that. So I welcome that.
Thank you, Leader. Okay, members, we'll open it up for a debate. Any volunteers? Councillor Hilliard.
Thank you, Chair. So obviously appreciating, as you said, it's a 1:45 and there's been a few changes. So a couple of questions were around how the reporting has changed or been aligned to the DLUC assurance review. And then similarly, new strategic plan coming along. Looking at the indicators, I think they're quite generic, and I probably would say they continue. So just your view, if you think they will continue, or if you see something missing. And then the last one is, again, we're seeing budget cuts envisaged for the 24-25 due to reduced government funding. Can you assure us that the areas of weakness, and in particular the exemptions, that they will have the due diligence and the support they require? Thank you.
Leader.
Thank you. Yeah, so if I start at the end, obviously the budget cuts are going to be difficult for everybody, but where we're not performing, then clearly that's where the energy of the officers needs to be focused. And if you look at, I mean, say some of the areas with the exception reports are around children's work, and I'm very conscious this isn't the place for a discussion on progress on children's. That's the Children's Scrutiny Board, so I don't really want to labour that point. But there are other areas. some of which are outside of our control, and others of which, if you read the exception report, so for example, the ones on street homelessness, you know, that exception report, I think, is a really good example of how the officers have said, look, this is where we want to be. These are the reasons we aren't there. These are the external factors. These are the things that we're actually doing. And I think the exception report process, we wouldn't, in an ideal world, you'd have none, would you? But where they exist, I think it's about making sure that they are a robust process. And whether you can afford to put enough money behind them is one thing, but actually recognizing what you need to do is important, even if you can't afford to do all of it, because at least then when opportunities come to do those things, you're in a good place. And if you take that one in particular, you know, the fact that we're now part of the Homewood programme gives us so much leverage to say, these are our targets, this is where we're struggling. How can the Homewood process and package help us meet those? So I think it's right to be nervous about what the budget cuts are going to bring, but I think this gives us the opportunity to be publicly scrutinised about are our priorities in the right place. In terms of whether we've got the right targets, say some of the targets we have are set externally and we have to report them to government. Those ones clearly have to be there. Others are in our gift, and I think until we've started looking at what the delivery plans are that relate to the new corporate strategy, it would be a bit premature to say which ones need to go and which ones need to stay. But I think this is a great opportunity for people to say, actually, I really value having this particular target, or I can see something missing. So my job here tonight, and I think the team's, Vicky's job behind me is to listen. To actually make sure that we get it right first time, because I'm sure it'll come back through scrutiny when we bring the delivery plans in. But it would be nice for scrutiny to have influenced it in the first place.
What else? Councillor Aikenhead.
Yes, I just wanted a bit more clarity around. I noticed that I love to look at the statistics, and but basically the overall 55% of the actions are on target, and that doesn't seem to me to be very high. But I do understand there's been a lot of things going on, so there may be good reason for that. I know that each target has its own reason, but I just wondered if you could make some comments on overall, why is that number so low, and what can we learn from it to make sure that we're not going forward, we've got a plan that we can be having higher percentages where we're on track.
So I don't think they're smart targets fundamentally. I think having a single target that says deliver on the targets in our climate and emergency action plan as a target, well, how is that ever going to be green? So by my standards, and I'm sure by some of our colleagues' standards, that's never going to be green until we achieve net zero. So it's only ever going to be amber, or if it is green, then we'll be criticised for it being green. So it's a no-win. So it feels like an unhelpful target to have. You know, install energy saving and renewable energy measures in retained council buildings whenever they're refurbished, amber. Well, there's a list of places where it's been done. Having a target that says by the end of next year, we will have 25% of all our buildings having renewable energy on. Well, you either do or you don't. So that's the lessons I think need to be learned, is looking at these targets and saying, how can you make them meaningful, and how can you actually stage progress along the way? Because they are just too generic. And I think that's where it needs to go back to the drawing board. So there'll be I would expect there to be similar themes, but I would expect the measurables to be there. And that's what the delivery plan is all about. And say it's a bit too early for that. But I say either inside the meeting or outside of the meeting, if people want to send specifics either to me or I'm sure to Sophie and Vicky in the policy team, I think that would be welcome.
The other members. Okay, I've got a couple of points. Firstly, I have to say that it's great to actually have a strategy and then to measure some performance against the strategy. And I remember when the strategy first came out, it was a breath of fresh air to see that we actually had something and we could measure the council's performance or how it was doing. And you wouldn't. And of course, things change. As we had the the pandemic and all those things that came along to get in the way of the progress. We shouldn't forget that. And so maybe a lot of the sort of red or areas may be easily explained because of some of those difficulties the council had. But one or two points I'd just like to raise, just generally, is things like the development, the regeneration of winter gardens, for example, and the big, now my understanding is those programs don't even exist anymore in the capital expenditure program. So, should those sort of things not be there, or, maybe a slightly more, I accept that at some point they will be going ahead, but at the moment they don't exist as a program, and it would be nice to understand in a bit more detail what was going on with some of those really major development issues. In the same way as some of the housing targets and difficulties that we're facing in terms of the number of delivery of housing, which has really tailed off significantly from what the 3 or 4 prior local authorities were producing. And now it's tailing off and getting worse with no signs at the moment of it picking up again. And that's obviously affecting our ability to provide houses for people. And it makes you wonder what's going on. It's a fairly general statement, but these are the sort of things you can pick up out of this plan because it highlights them as things that we want to achieve. And we're not, for whatever reasons, in some areas, not being able to do that. Is there anything you'd like to offer for those comments, Lady?
I'm very happy to. I suppose it's about what's the purpose of this paper, because I think it's useful for Scrutiny to use this paper and papers like it as a catalyst for the deep dives that Scrutiny should be doing, rather than trying to scrutinise every line in the paper. Do you see what I mean? So, for example, it's absolutely right that this takes you as a group to saying a couple of themes in this is regeneration. We've had a step change. We've closed future places. We've brought it in-house. That only happened on the 31st of October. We're putting a process in place whereby I think within the next, I thought it was by the end of December, but maybe it's by the end of January, we should have all the wrappers for all of the bits of work so we know what we're buying, what we're not buying. That piece of work's coming to an end. So my take on that would be there are a number of projects here that we need to get an update on, and I would be probably suggesting taking in the spring a paper that says we want to have a deep dive on the projects, and the same with housing. I think slightly more generic. It's slightly different. There are some targets in here. So one of the exception reports that you can see is on the number of BCP homes that we've built. And the reason we missed the target was 2 sites. One had an SSE built box that had to be moved, and the other one had another internal project. Actually, I think that when it comes to that target, I don't think that needs to be particularly scrutinised, because I think it's a good response to this is why. The more generic, why are not as many homes being built that we need? I think the local plan is there to address, and that's where that sits. So I would think that rather than taking this paper as we want answers on each line, is where are the areas that this suggests that we might want to investigate more deeply, and have our own paper written that talks to half a dozen areas. That's how I would treat it. I think it's because it comes out every quarter, doesn't it? And so it's a good way of saying, actually, is the problem getting better or worse? So I think some of the trends in here are quite interesting, because you can see whether it's a blip or whether actually it is an ongoing problem. But I don't know whether the team have a different view about how they think we should use the paper, how you should use the paper, how Cabinet uses the paper might be different to how Scrutiny uses the paper.
Okay. I just welcome Councillor Broadhead, who's just arrived late into the meeting. Just let everybody know he's here. Chief Exec, you wanted to come in?
Thanks, Jay. Just to add to that, I think if this committee were to ask for a paper looking at particular progress on an aspect, that would help us as well to demonstrate that we've broken the link between the Cabinet cycle and the activities of overview scrutiny, and that the Cabinet cycle stimulates you to ask for something and do a deep dive into a particular area. So I'd certainly encourage that approach coming out of this paper. If you said, well, there's a particular area here that we want to have a look at some point, very happy to support that, and then we'll bring a report to overview and scrutiny of progress on that matter outside of the Cabinet cycle.
Yeah, thank you. That's very useful. Councillor Tarling.
Yeah, thank you. I think my questions has probably been answered. I had a few questions against this, the fact that it was out of date, one relating to the FCERM and the coastal stuff, but what the leaders just said, obviously the comments made about the Poole Bay plan, Christchurch Bay plan have been superseded now. But it is, as the leader says, a good memoir to start asking questions until we get the sort of revised corporate plan, which will include parts of that, I'm sure. Then you know, there's lots of questions I probably had to ask, but I think taking on board the fact that it's the information here is actually quite well out of date now. I think it's really just as a template for us. But thank you.
Yes, thank you. Let's say a bit more. No. Oh yeah, Councillor Hilliard.
Thank you, Chair. Just on the point of the Chief Executive about something to focus on, you know, whether to do it now or later on in the forward plan discussion, and putting my hands on the table that I'm not a member here, so I can say anything, and I'm not actually going to probably do the work. So is it appropriate now or to carry it forward?
Probably not, actually. Right. And the reason I say that is because we've got some forward planning workshops coming up, and we're all going to be involved in that. And I think it's a great. This is just another one of the lists actually that we've been producing to review. So I'm sure this one will be very useful. Yeah, yeah. And it really does link into the governance assurance review in terms of performance, the way the council is performing. And it's just an area of where we are measuring our performance. Now we can take that into account for overview and scrutiny in the future. Yeah. Okay. Councillor Sam.
Thank you, Chair. Just a comment in response to something that the leader said about using this as something to think about what we might want to see in the new report for the new corporate strategy. There's a really glaringly obvious omission in terms of performance measures. You talked about we've got a very unmeasurable target around the climate and the climate emergency action plan, but a very obvious measure that's not in the section where you get the figures, the measures. We should be reporting carbon emissions. It's not. We should be reporting carbon emissions. The absolute basis of our climate action plan has to be: are we reducing our carbon emissions? That's what a climate action plan does. So that's a measure that's not there, and it is a bit mad that it's not. So just thought I'd mention that.
Councillor Slade. Yeah.
Yeah, can I just respond to that by saying we have a separate climate plan, which is brought forward on an annual basis, and I believe is coming to the March meeting of Place and Environment, and that will have all of those measures. And I think, you know, it's worth remembering that you have this report, but there are delivery plans until the delivery plans will have that. And if it's felt appropriate that those things need to sit within the delivery plans of the corporate performance report as well as in the climate plan, because again, there is a carbon footprint, but then there's a whole load of measures beneath that, and it's about how we're able to measure it, whether we have the right technology to be able to do it, whether we can invest enough to be able to do it properly, is really important. And I wouldn't want to be chucking figures down that don't have any basis, any evidence base behind them, when there are other measures that we might be best to do. So my instinct is, at the moment, the climate action plan is the priority, because that's where we can really go into a lot of detail, and there, I don't know if you saw the previous one, there were some really good parts to it. There were some bits that left a lot to be desired, and there were some glaring gaps. So now we've got the new team in place. That's probably where I would focus that energy. But I think you're absolutely right, is that where we do have measures, those measures need to be proper measures, and there is no measure at all here. So.
Yeah, okay, thanks. Do you want to come back on that, did you?
Yeah, thanks. Just, yeah, I take the point, but I think, I mean, I'm just looking at the page 8 and the performance measures under sustainable environment, and you've got some things that we measure. And to me, it seems that one of those things should be the council's emissions, because we have a target in there about reducing them. We have a climate action plan that does belong at this high level in a performance report about the council's. That is that top figure.
I take that on board. I'm not going to comment on it because that's not my portfolio, and I don't know what measures we do have. I don't know how the council is in a position to measure that. So it would be, we know how many blue flags we have. We know how many journeys are taken. I don't know how we measure that. So I'm not going to make a commitment to measure something if we don't have the ability to do it.
I suppose my point is that we should.
I don't know.
We've got to know that.
My suggestion, Councillor Salmon, is you defer that until the appropriate place, which is the climate plan, and then that will give us the information. When the new delivery plans come in May, we can look at that. But this is a backward looking thing, and I'm certainly not going to recommend we add it at this point because this is a backward looking paper.
That wasn't what I was asking. I was really responding to your saying, you know, could we suggest things for the next iteration of this going forward? And that seemed a very obvious high level number that's missing from it at the moment.
I have to say that rattling around in my little pea brain is a memory that we don't actually have a mechanism and a target for council for CO2 emissions, and we had it explained to us in minute detail by Councillor Green when he was here, and they gave us a status of how we were performing against that target. And so that we, in the past, we have certainly had targets, and we were shown how we were progressing towards that target. But you know, that's historical data now. But the point, I'm sure, has been well taken. But I think the climate plan is the one, personally. Councillor Hilliard.
Thank you, it's Councillor Tarling, but we used to go to school together, so it's easily we're brothers from another mother, as the saying goes. Just because it wouldn't be an overview scrutiny board without me quoting an ISO standard. There is an ISO standard for measuring greenhouse gases, which is 14,064. So there are actually methods we could use to do it, but it's as leaders just told me, it's not for today.
Okay, members, I don't think there's any more questions on that. As I say, it's really good to have a plan that we can see how the strategy is moving, and we look forward very much to seeing the new one. And yeah, so I think we'll move on now to the next agenda item, which is agenda item 7, I think, shareholder governance review. I got the right number. Now, shareholder governance review has sort of emerged rather quickly over the last few weeks in the paper that Ian has written. Now, I'm aware, of course, that not only is our own internal assurance review and the government assurance review has flagged this as an area of the way the council measures the performance of its of the companies that it owns. And this, I think, is the paper that addresses some of the issues that have been identified in those assurance reviews and indicates a way forward for the council. So I think, is it you, Ian, that will introduce that, or is it the leader's going to introduce it? Sorry, Jeff, portfolio holder.
I'm here to support Jeff because there may be a couple of things where he chooses to defer to me.
Okay. Sorry, Councillor Hannah, I didn't see you hiding over there at the back of the room there. So thank you.
I appreciate that I'm slightly hidden from you, but only from yourself. I'm not actually hiding. I'm grateful to Ian for preparing this report. It comes to me to introduce it because of my role as portfolio holder for governance. And as you've already said, Chair, It relates to the way in which council-owned companies interrelate with the council itself. And Ian has very kindly looked at the reviews mentioned in the executive report, and he has come up with recommendations for the way in which we should operate in the future. Those relate primarily to decision making and to the roles held by the various parties. And it's the case that the recommendation is that it is very much Cabinet which makes decisions on policies and budgets, which then the companies are requested to carry out. It is the company management boards which make decisions as to how they go about that process. And in the context of roles, one of the lessons learned is that we should not have councillors as representatives on the boards. And that, in a sense, parallels the way in which the council operates within itself, that where Cabinet makes decisions and officers then seek to carry out those policies and those decisions, we as councillors do not sit on the officer teams and boards and take part in the detailed discussions and the decision making that they have to do in the process of managing the operations. So that is basically what the report is about. The detail is in the report itself. If there are queries, then please do raise them. And one of the 3 or 4 of us hopefully will be able to give answers. But could I just add to that, that there is a very brief recommendation in the report itself, following further discussion with Ian and with the leader. I intend to bring a slightly amended recommendation to Cabinet when we discuss. And the 2 key elements to that are, first of all, to state clearly that this is for council-owned companies where we are represented on the boards, and not for charities and other such organisations. And the second one is that it may be worth reviewing not simply the governance of the companies, but also the current business case for their continuance. So part of the review will be looking at the options for delivering the relevant services to make sure that we are doing things as cost efficiently as we can. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Before, can I just clarify is this paper also going to the Audit and Governance Committee? It is.
It is.
It is. Okay. And do you know when it's going to them?
On Thursday.
On Thursday.
It comes to Cabinet on Wednesday and then audit on Thursday.
Okay, thank you. Ian, you wanted to come in? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I just wanted to add a few things to Councillor Hannah's introduction, if I may. So the objectives of the report are firstly to introduce a different and new shareholder governance model. So this report is primarily about how the council behaves as a shareholder in relation to these companies. We've looked at best practice, and our intention is to adopt a best practice model which has been developed by local partnerships, which is a body that supports local government and is supported in itself by the RGA. And the report to Cabinet is also going to recommend that we do a review of all of the council companies. And as Councillor Hannah said, we're going to look not just at do they comply with good governance, but we're going to look at are the reasons why we have these companies still valid? Is this the right mechanism for delivering our policies? And that will be the subject in each case of a future report. So one of the reasons for doing this report is because of the best value letter that we received from the government, which highlighted Future Places as one of the areas that we needed to improve. Now, my background is that before coming to BCP Council, which I did in May, I was working at Liverpool City Council and I was leading their finance improvement programme. And one of the strands that I was working on there was their council companies. And there were very similar issues with the way in which the council had taken on the role of being a shareholder and had failed really to tackle it in a good way. And before that, I was working at Croydon, again, as part of supporting the council through its financial crisis. And I was working on their council companies. And in fact, I'm still on the board of one of the council companies at Croydon, which I'm currently shutting down. So my background gives me the insight into the sorts of issues that occur in council companies. And I can say that wherever I have worked, the same issues have popped up. And I'm sorry to say they've also popped up here. So my starting point is that the council did not get this right, and still hasn't quite got this right. So this report is setting out a way in which we can learn the lessons of the past and apply them to managing our business for future. Now, the question about future places led us to have a discussion about whether it was necessary to have an investigation into future places or not. And we spent some time looking at this internally. We came to the conclusion that there was no evidence of any fraud and there was no evidence of any deliberate malpractice. What we did see is that there were quite a number of lessons that we needed to learn about how council behaved as shareholder and indeed about how the company was set up and how it behaved. So this report aims to deal with those issues. And what it gives us is a way in which we can actually tackle the shareholder governance in relation to all of our council companies. There is a timeline which we've set out broadly around how long it's going to take us, we think, to review the other council companies. And there will be a second phase, which is what Councillor Hannah is referring to, which will also look at any charities or other bodies where we have representation on the governance. So I will stop there. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Okay, members. Councillor Walters.
Just a quick question. So if we remove councillors from the board of these companies, is there any opportunity where there's too many layers of communication between the companies themselves and the council, and we could end up having second, third, fourth hand information going between them, and maybe the councillors don't know what's going on at these companies because it's going through multiple layers of officers between the councillors and the companies themselves? Is there any chance of that happening?
So on for you, Councillor. Yeah, no doubt.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, there is always a risk that information doesn't travel up and down the organisation in the way that we would like it to. But the purpose of the governance arrangements that's set out in this report is to try and give us some confidence that we've created a structure in which that information can flow from top to bottom in an appropriate way. And it does say that in the report. I will just say a few things about members being on the boards of companies, if that's helpful. Obviously, it's very important that members are democratically accountable, and so decisions that members make have to be transparent. And company boards are not a very good vehicle for this, because a lot of the business that they conduct is commercially confidential and cannot be discussed in the public domain. So, even if everybody is as scrupulous and careful as they can be about that, it still leads to the perception that decisions are being taken in secret and without the proper democratic accountability. So we do have to recognise that is an issue. The second thing is that companies are a delivery vehicle and not a forum in which policy should be discussed. As I say, that should be discussed in the open, and I wouldn't expect to see those sorts of discussions happening on a company board. I'd expect them to be talking about how are they going to deliver the council's priorities, which have already been decided by members in a different forum. Thirdly, in this report, one of the recommendations is that the individuals with skills, with the necessary skills, are the people who are appointed to a company board. Now, some of these companies can be quite specialised, and it wouldn't be reasonable to expect that if you only appointed members and officers onto those boards, that you would be able to draw upon a pool that's sufficiently large of the expertise that you would need. So it's very important that we give ourselves the opportunity to tap into people who are the experts in that field and appoint them onto those boards and task them in the right sort of way. So for those reasons, it's generally now viewed as not the best thing to do to have boards that have members on them.
Thank you. We've got Councillor Slade and then Councillor Broadhead lining up. Councillor Slade.
Yeah, I just wanted to sort of build on that a little bit, just to say that if it is the members, so the cabinet, portfolio holder, and if necessary, the full council, with scrutiny, playing its part, that sets the business plan and the delivery plan. So it sets the business plan, it then tasks the company to deliver, it then approves that plan, and those employees of the council are then expected to deliver what they're asked to deliver. I think the experience with Future Places was different to the experience we've had with the other companies, where that's how it's worked, and that's made us all feel slightly like, well, that's not how it worked. And therefore, because it didn't work quite like that, there was that muddying of the water. Then I think we perhaps are questioning whether, work the model, which is why we need to go that second stage of what is the reason it's a company in the first place. And in every case, by having the best practice guidance set up and the sort of almost like a checklist of what is the reason for this being a company, and keep that at the heart of it. And if there's a good reason why it should be a company, and as opposed to an in-house operation, then we need to check against that. And so the intention is that once we've created this governance, that we then go back to each company and say, should it exist? If it should exist, does it comply with the guidance that audit have helped us to create? And if it doesn't, either should it exist, or how do you change it so that it does comply? Because that way there's no reason to scrutiny wouldn't feel the need to bring forward a member of another organisation. We would challenge the cabinet members or the corporate director about why you haven't done something, because we're the ones, and the corporate directors are the ones responsible. So I think it's experience that's made us a bit nervous of this. But I think if we got back to, why does the company exist? Does it need to exist? Does the reason it was set up still exist? Because it might have had a good reason, but that might not exist anymore. And so I think this is a really good opportunity to look at all of them. And I would stress, as Jeff has said, although at this point the charities aren't included, which is BH Live and BH Live Enterprises, one of the reasons for that is obviously they're subject to Charity Commission rules as well. But actually, so we might have to do it slightly differently, but we should still do it, because if it's good for the goose, it's good for the gander. So I think we need to be sure that we've got the right systems in place.
Thank you. Just before I ask Councillor Broad to come in, I'd just like to bring members' attention to the recommendation in this paper. Overview and Scrutiny Committee considers the proposal shareholder governance arrangement and the proposed plan and methodology for reviewing council companies and reports its views to Cabinet. So on Wednesday, I'm going to have to report what this committee says. So it's important that, you know, that we make a record of your views on this. And I have a few which I'll come on to in due course, but Councillor Broadhead is next. Thank you. And then it's Councillor Moore.
Thank you very much, Chairman. It doesn't surprise me that you've got some views on this because you've been talking about this for a number of years. So just a couple of comments from me. Firstly, I just want to completely agree with the leader on that last point around that constant analysis that we should be doing for our council-owned companies to make sure that, well, either the reason that they existed as a council-owned company in the first place continues to be the valid reason, or that they're performing adequately in their function, whether you need to adjust accordingly. This is absolutely integral, so fully agree with that. I suppose the question,
Councillor Broadhead, can I just come in just for a second? You went dead there for a few seconds and we missed what you were saying. So if you can go back a couple of sentences, it would help.
Yeah. It was profound as well. Can you hear me now? Okay. I was agreeing with the leader is what I was doing and basically saying I think that constant analysis of the reasons for looking at the council companies is absolutely crucial in terms of making sure that first of all they're delivering what they set up to deliver, but also to make sure that that it is still the right mechanism to use. I'd caution throwing the baby out with the bathwater. So it is very easy with sometimes to bring these services in-house because that just seems a bit easier. But you know, but as long as you're looking at that in a relatively objective way, I'd completely agree with that. Comments what I would have is about the proposals that are in front of us and how they're implemented. And I share Oliver's points around that accountability. Strikes me that if you actually, and can you hear me still, Chair? Yeah, it strikes me that the proposals that are coming forward are actually really quite similar to the proposals that Future Places was structured around, because a lot of advice was sought when Future Places was formed. And as well, some colleagues will know, some weren't there. There were councillors on the board of Future Places for the initial phase, only until external non-executive directors could be appointed, and then councillors stood off the board. And it was very much that intelligent client shareholder model. So actually many of the proposals that are in this paper were what we were doing with Future Places. What people seem to a lot of people seem to think was that perhaps the implementation wasn't quite right on that. And yet conversely, a lot of the plaudits that we've made around council-owned companies working quite well, when we look at some of our other council-owned companies such as Seascape Homes and Property Limited, the Seascape Group, actually have never quite operated in the way that this paper is setting out, with that kind of very hands-off approach, no councillors on the board, a shareholder model, which is kind of holding them to account rather than doing it in a more collaborative, conciliatory way. So there's just something in there in that the proposals here are actually emulating what Future Places was supposed to do. And because of concerns around that, we're taking the Future Places model and kind of bringing it to the others. So I suppose is a long-winded way of saying, how do we ensure that what we've seen within, for instance, what we think is going well, the Seascape Group and BBML, that elected member constant accountability doesn't get eroded away? Because I think as another member said, there is a bit of a danger sometimes that with many layers, whilst it's very easy to argue, and I agree with most of what Mr. O'Donnell said around the operational side of these companies, there is something about it's just one meeting per year or quarterly is looking at how these companies are actually operating. Do we have that confidence as elected members that they're actually doing what we intended them to do? So I'd like that's my question. There is a smaller side. Any members that haven't actually read the local authority company review guidance, it is really comprehensive. It is really really good document. It doesn't say anywhere that it's broadly accepted for elected members not to be on the board of council companies, and indeed I can't find that written down anywhere. it might well be that that is the best course of action, but it's certainly not in the report that we're seeking the guidance from. So I suppose I just want some confidence of how do we make sure that elected members are still accountable for the activities of these companies.
Any volunteers to answer that one? Ian, thank you.
No system is going to be perfect, but I think what we are aiming to do here is to create a way in which we remove all of the issues that can arise in the way that you construct these things, and leave ourselves with a clear model that is understood by everybody and does not contain any blurring of accountability. So one of the other issues about members being on the board of a company is around conflicts of interest. So you do find that as an officer, if you're put on the board of a company, you suddenly have to wear two hats. You have to represent the interests of the council, but you also have to represent the interests of the company, and you have a legal duty to do that. And sometimes those interests are not fully aligned. And so you find yourself in a situation of having to reconcile that as an officer. As a member, you bring another dimension to that, which is the political dimension. So there is an issue about having to also manage the perception that you could be using the company to influence the way in which it delivers its services for political gain. So that is a difficult issue to have to grapple with. So I think taking those things out of the mix is leaves us with a much clearer and more simple way of understanding the accountability in relation to companies. So that leaves us with the question of, is it going to be difficult to hold these companies to account? And is there a risk that the information that we're going to get about the companies, about their performance, and the degree to which they are being successful in delivering our policies, it is going to be satisfactory? And I mean, the answer to that is it really depends upon whether we implement this model in the way that's intended. One of the things that we failed to do with Future Places was to implement the shareholder governance arrangements that we said we would. So, we said that we were going to create a team of officers who were going to take responsibility for performing that shareholder role. In the event, we didn't. And consequence of that is that the work didn't get done. And so, we didn't see the sort of rigor that we would have expected in terms of holding the company to account, in terms of reporting its performance. And indeed, there were some differences between what the council commissioned and what actually finally appeared in the company business plan. Had there been enough capacity and had there been the right attention given to that, then it's much less likely that that would have happened.
Thank you. Councillor Aikenhead. Some more. Right.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, can I just ask a question about the Aspire adoption? I mean, obviously, this is a completely different type of business from Future Places, etc. And as I understood it, it was also Pan Dorset. And in the past, there's been like two portfolio holders on it, one from Dorset and one from BCP. How or what? I don't really understand why that was included in this. And how's it going to work in the future? Thanks.
The report recommends that we're going to do a review of each one of these. We haven't done it yet, and so we'll come to that when we've done the review, and we'll make some recommendations.
Councillor Broadhead, you wanted to come back in on that last point you made. Thank you. I missed you. Sorry.
No, thank you very much. And again, I just want to reiterate, I agree with almost everything that Mr. O'Donnell has said. And actually, once again, the the kind of LGA and others' advice on this is absolutely to make sure that those conflicts are managed and people know their which hat they're wearing, etc. etc. My concern actually is if this is the route that we're going down, it's precisely some of the things that he said, and it's about the accountability of making sure, if we're having this much more kind of hands-off way, that we are getting the outcomes that we want. And looking at Appendix 1, the slightly practical issue that I have is that it almost falls into a not dissimilar trap to what the people are claiming happened with future places. And if you actually look on the left-hand side, the BCP Council as a shareholder role, it's only really as you get down to the fourth layer that there's that kind of day-to-day or more immediate interaction with the company, which in some cases can be delivering almost the entirety of a council service. And that is only happening at a kind of an officer down there level and a officer level of the management of the company level. And it just seems to me that if we were going to go down this model, and actually in many ways, it does strike me as perhaps the right thing to do in certain settings, if you are purporting that there were issues, for instance, which I wouldn't disagree with in future places, around the council not being strong enough as a shareholder and not having as close a relationship as they should do, should you not be strengthening the levels above that kind of, and not just the commissioning team, but above, to make sure that whilst there is a separation there, that nobody in the two different camps is under any illusion around the not just the direction that they should be setting, which you check on once a year, but the spirit of the direction as well. And I suppose that's the danger of the ultra formality, which is absolutely necessary. If the layers of interaction are too far down, you could easily in this model, without, I think, perhaps some more permeability further up, maybe even at cabinet level, end up in a situation where by the time the elected politicians figure out that the company isn't quite doing what they intended it to do with their policy, it could be too late. So is there no recognition for maybe the fact that commissioning layer and interaction is just too low down?
Just before you come in, Leader, on this, Councillor Canberra, I see that you're waiting to speak, and I'll bring you in as soon as this point has been dealt with. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Broadhead. I suppose my response to that is, why would we think that a company that has a clear business plan and a proper management structure not be doing what it's supposed to do? Because we as members don't get involved in the day-to-day operations of what a social worker does or what our housing delivery team does. We have an arm's length approach, and if there are concerns raised, we go down through the relevant processes, and the relevant shareholder officer would deal with the relevant member of staff. I think it's a bit disingenuous to suggest that the company would not be behaving just because we've had a situation where there was a difficult situation. So I just wonder what we're judging ourselves by. If the council is very clear in the business plan, the targets, the delivery model, and actually properly sets that strategy. If the council sets a very woolly strategy, then there is a risk. But the important thing is to make sure that that business plan is very clear. Otherwise, what would make you think they were going to go off and do something random? And if we do think that, we'll go back to where we started from, is what was the purpose for having the company in the first place? And it may be that actually the reason that you had the company is no longer relevant. And if there is no reason to have the company, why have the company? And that's why I think we've got to go back to it. But I think it's a bit worrying to make the suggestion that we should expect those problems.
Okay. Sorry, just very quickly, Phil, if you wouldn't mind. Thank you.
Yeah, just in direct answer to that question, because unfortunately that is reality, and I think it's no different in the actual council itself. And anybody that has been in a cabinet or senior position knows that it's just sometimes not enough to set a policy and then get regular updates and hope that it's all going well, because actually by the time it does start to unravel, and we are the elected ones, we're the ones that who are accountable to our residents. It sometimes can be too late. I mean, it sounds like I'm being very negative, but it is all just about us doing our job and being accountable. I think that's exactly the same within the council as it is without the council as well. So, that's why my point was, in the same way that as a cabinet member, I wouldn't once a year set a strategy and then hope that an officer will let me know if anything deviated, or I'd want them to be checking in with me on a regular basis. I think it's absolutely acceptable that you'd be expecting the council and company to do the same if they were in charge of a certain service provision. And that's my only point. I'm not actually trying to create an argument over this. I'm looking at Appendix 1 and reflecting on somebody that has been in this position a number of times and thinking, if you are a leader, if you're a cabinet member, the only interaction with this new model that you will have is about 4 layers down. And then, and it might be that is enough. And in an ideal world, one hopes it is. What I was perhaps suggesting is that shareholder briefing level, that shareholder with elected members, maybe has regular meetings with certain people within the company anyway, in a little bit like we've done, for instance, in the seascape companies when you're on the board, but not in as formal way. That was my suggestion.
Thank you. Councillor Hannah. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I think, like the leader, I'm struggling slightly to see the distinction in terms of how we would keep track of what is happening with the company as against how we keep track of what is happening within the council structure and officers who are dealing with the various different services internally. It does seem to me that there are the two safeguards that are in place in both situations, and Councillor Broadhead has already indicated one of those, which is the portfolio holder can still liaise with the officer representative as frequently as they wish, and can get information as to what is taking place in that way prior to anything coming to Cabinet as a formal report, just to monitor the situation. And the other consideration is that there is a scrutiny process which is available, and it is open to a relevant scrutiny committee to decide that, yes, they're interested in what is going on in this particular area at this point in time, and they would welcome a report coming to the committee.
Thank you. Councillor Canavan, please.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for the opportunity of being able to speak. I should perhaps start by welcoming the comment that Councillor Hannah made at the outset, which was that there is going to be an additional recommendation coming forward to Cabinet about looking at the business case and the options for delivery. I think that's very welcome, but it does make me question what the point of this paper is at all. I agree with the points that Councillor Broadhead has made. There is a very worrying lack of democratic accountability in this paper, and the distance between where the operational delivery is and the accountability lies seems to be being extended in this paper rather than shortened. So although I recognise the suggestion that Councillor Broadhead has made, I think the problem is created by the paper itself. There is a lack of democratic accountability, and those of us who have in the past been directors of companies know perfectly well what the issue is about conflicts of interest and know how to handle those. But we have seen in many different examples what happens when a situation within a particular company or even in an individual contract begins to unravel, and there is not the democratic accountability, there is not the structure in place to do anything about it quickly. And then you hit a problem, you know, some considerable way down the track where it is impossible to recover from. So I'm very sceptical about the value of this paper. I would have thought that a better way forward would have been to look at each individual company on a case-by-case basis, say, okay, what is this company supposed to be delivering? Is it delivering? Could we do it better? What's its business model? And you know, can we do it better? And do that on an individual case-by-case basis, rather than creating what seems to me to be an entirely artificial process, where it doesn't give us that opportunity to do any of that. But if you were to look at each individual company in the round, you'll be able to look at, well, what's it delivering? What should its governance be? You know, given the purpose of the company in the first place, and should it exist, and all of that kind of stuff, rather than trying to create a structure that we try and then measure these different companies against. That just seems to me to be the wrong way around, if I may say so, Chair. But that's just my view, and thank you for the opportunity of being able to make that point.
Thank you, Councillor Slade.
Yeah, I take part of that completely on board, because I think that it's part of a bit that perhaps we should have been clear about from the beginning, is what was the purpose of this paper? So this paper started its life as a means of looking at what were the lessons learned from Future Places, and how can we make sure that what went wrong with Future Places doesn't happen again. And in some respects, Councillor Canavan is ahead of the game, because stage 2, which is the work that starts now and moves through the rest of this year, which is what are all the companies that we are involved with? What is our involvement? What is their purpose? What is their remit? What should they be? Is the work that is to come. And I think there's possibly a bit of frustration in some cases, and I'm not suggesting it is in Councillor Canavan's, but I do know that there are some people who would probably like to see a bit of blood on the carpet as a result of, you know, the fallout from Future Places. And actually what we've done instead is to say, let's not do that, that's unhelpful, but let's make sure that all of the things which the paper does talk about, and it is quite wordy, and I do understand it took me a couple of reads to get through to make sense of the paper, but if you look from paragraph 9 through to paragraph 20, there's quite a lot of these are all the things that were thrown up by Future Places, some of which may or may not apply to the other companies. So I think the desire to check that none of those things might be in place for any of the other organisations is a good thing to do. I think Councillor Canavan is right in saying, must this be the only model? But this was the sort of best practice model, is that if we deviate from it, we need to be comfortable in our own minds why we're deviating from it. So I think it's more of a guide rather than an instruction. But you know, I'm very happy to be, you know, corrected on that. But I just think we've got to be clear. There are problems or issues or improvements we can make to the companies that we've got, but that's the next step. And this is about closing a chapter and restarting the book with a different frame of mind.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Goodall.
Just a quick one. I'm just trying to get my head around this from a layman's point of view. But can somebody tell me if there is an officer who's also a director, can he be called or she be called to a scrutiny committee, and can he or she refuse to answer questions on the ground of confidentiality and conflict of interest?
I think I can answer that one for Councillor Goodall, and the answer is yes.
Right. Okay.
Thank you. Councillor Aiken, thank you.
Thank you. So actually I've got a few things I wanted to say, and I can really put, there's two main things. Firstly, I want to make some suggestions about the review that you're going to do, and then I also want to talk on the paper itself. But I'll start off with the bit that you've added, that you're going to review whether this is the right way forward for the companies. Because first of all, I'd really like to applaud that. I think that is something that if you hadn't added it, I was going to suggest it. So excellent. But I would like to make a few suggestions of things that I think that you could take into account when you're doing that. And I think that I might want to make it a formal proposal so that then we can see if the committee agrees with things or wants to amend any of them in or out or add other things to it, and that will help us to have something to go forward from the committee. So my suggestions are that when you're taking into account the benefits of the different ways of providing these services, that we should be not just considering the cost benefits, but also the actual benefits to our residents. Secondly, that we must take into account what accountability and transparency it is possible to build in with whichever model we decide to use. And thirdly, how we can ensure that however we deliver these services, the people doing it on the ground do have aims that are fully aligned with the council's aims and strategies. I don't know if yeah, I'd like to put that as a formal proposal so that we can debate it, and I say people can amend it if they like and or add things.
Do you think we could just come back to that after we've had it?
Yeah, okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
So I have got some other points I wanted to make, that if you keep that for in a minute. So the other points I wanted to make were about this structure that you've got in that you're talking about moving to, and I think it's great that you've had a look through the lessons that can be learned from future places. But I think that we have to be quite careful that the lessons from one particular instance doesn't colour everything that we do. I totally agree that it is a good idea not to have councillors as full board members of council companies, but I have not really heard any reasons that convince me that we shouldn't have councillors there as observers. I hear the argument. I hear the argument that, you know, councillors are thinking about transparency and accountability. That's exactly why we need them to be there as observers, because actually, and I heard the comment that sometimes the aims of the company are not quite aligned with the aims of the council. But that's exactly why we need to have councillors there as observers, because in the end, we represent the residents, and these companies are spending public money. And so we're not there representing the council, we're not there representing the company, we're there representing the residents. And if there's something which is commercially sensitive, sure, it's going to be confidential, just like we consider things in exempt business here. It's a natural part of being a councillor that you can't share everything, but you are there as a councillor being able to make that judgment as to whether it's something that is commercially sensitive or whether it's something that's being just a little bit hushed up. And we just cannot emphasize how important it is to have this accountability and transparency, and councillors distancing themselves from it is not a helpful way, I think, to go forward. And in addition to that, I believe there's a sentence in here that says it's not expected that the scrutiny committee will invite people from the company to the scrutiny committees. I am sure we absolutely will. And I think that they will need to be able to answer our questions. And if our questions are commercially sensitive, then we will need to go into exempt business in order to get the answers to those. We have procedures for that. It's fine. We all know about interests and procedures. And so I think that we need to be just less worried about protecting councillors from things and recognise that we need to do our job by being there, scrutinising, seeing the information, even if it's something we can't share with the public. At least we can be there looking at it and being confident that eventually, years later, when it comes out, that we're not embarrassed and it's good, honest information and the right things are going on. So much as I kind of hope that a lot of these companies, we might actually find that it's not, this way is not quite the way to do things. If we are going to have arm's length companies, we need to make sure that we are doing everything we can to make them more transparent and accountable, not less. So I believe that we should have councillors as observers on the board.
Thank you, Councillor Aiken. We'll come back to the motion that you wanted to make
Yes.
later on, because we may wish to add other things to it, if that's all
Yes,
right.
exactly.
Yeah,
And I
yeah,
might
yeah.
wish to make that one as a proposal as well.
Yeah, okay, okay,
Councillors should be allowed to be observers on the board.
okay. Just before I come to you, Mike, Ian, there was a point you wanted to come back on earlier on, which I missed on. Thank you.
Thank you. I have to admit I've forgotten what that point was, but I have got some points to make about the proposals that have just been made. I suppose the first one is thank you for recognising that even attending.
Would you mind just holding those points just until we come back to that particular motion, if that's all right? Because, sorry.
Well, I think it'd be quite useful to hear them.
Oh, I'm not saying we shouldn't hear them. It's just that other members have yet to speak.
Okay.
And you may wish to include other things in it, that's all.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. So are there any orphan members? Oliver? Yeah. Oh, sorry, Councillor Tarling. Yes.
So thank you very much. I too have something I wish to say on Council 8. It's proposals when they come through for debate, and it's going to touch on slightly on what I'm going to say is that the appendix that's made here, the appendix 1 is about shareholder governance arrangements, is shareholder governance arrangements, and the fact that there is a little line there that shows the BCP council scrutiny feeding into cabinet. Obviously that line there, I think we do need to add in the additional line into sort of the next tier down, and a point that Councillor Aikenhead has just made about oversight and scrutiny is that we will have some oversight and scrutiny. I disagree, not into the company, but into that members and officers only, rather than just scrutiny into the council. So that's the only point I made on Appendix 1, is that there's a missing line there between the scrutiny function and the sort of next tier down, possibly all the way down to the BCP Council Shareholder Operations Board. As part of the OSB, I think we should be able to call in the Shareholder Operations Board in for scrutiny.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Darling. Councillor Waters.
Yeah, so I think there's a debate going on between letting companies that we own do what they've been hired to do, and the other side being we want to make sure that we can scrutinise them. I'm wondering if there's a middle ground between the two, where we don't necessarily have the councillors on the board, but we have access as councillors to some form of Power BI chart which demonstrates the leading and lagging indicators of KPIs of these companies, so we can see in real time the data of what are they achieving and what are they not achieving, rather than waiting for maybe 3 monthly or yearly reports from the businesses themselves, so that a councillor can log into any kind of system and see how a company is doing, and then reach out to the officer on the board of said company in order to say, I've seen this issue come up. Can we discuss it with the business?
Okay, did you put a suggestion for performance management, basically, and oversight? Yeah. Okay, you want to just not like that? Thank you. That's the slate.
Thank you. Just in response to that last thing, I think you're probably being rather ambitious in suggesting that the companies will have far more advanced technological solutions than the council, which is their parent company and potentially wholly owned shareholder. If we can have that for them, can we have it for everybody else, please? I'm not sure that that's an appropriate level of oversight by an individual councillor. I don't think that would be expected by any other company, and I don't think it would be right. I think there is an amendment to the, or there is a paragraph in the paper that I think could be dramatically improved. I just want to add, I think that Councillor Aitkenhead is absolutely right that ensuring the company aims to fully align with the council should be a given. Absolutely. So when you come on to that, you know, so I don't think there's an argument over that at all, and I'd gladly add that in wherever. I think, was it paragraph 21, where it says it's not expected that representatives of council companies would attend scrutiny meetings or respond directly to questions from scrutiny members. I think that that's a apologies, Ian, a less than great sentence. I think that that would read better if it said that whilst representatives of council companies may attend scrutiny to answer any specific questions, as we would with a specific officer, the scrutiny is of the senior manager, you know, the shareholder, as in the officer and the corp and the member, because they're the ones who are setting the strategy. So the accountability line is staff member A, who you're trying to hold to account, isn't held to account by you. He's held to account by his manager. His manager is held to account by the council commissioner, who's held to account by us. Now that might sound complicated, and if that's too complicated, then get rid of the company and have them as an internal. But it's not really appropriate for us, for you as scrutiny, to be churning up the manager of a third party company, because actually you should be having a go at us for failing to hold those people to account. So I think that what's intended by 21 and what's written by 21 is perhaps not quite the same thing, because I think we can go a lot further. I think that's too stringent what's in that paper. And I think one of the reasons why this paper is as it is because this is 2 days before Cabinet, the Cabinet paper and the alignment is slightly out. So that's why you've got amendments going to Wednesday. We didn't want to be tabling for your paper tonight, but we were still in the process of looking at the paper and saying it's not quite where we want it to be. I don't know whether that's helpful.
Thank you. Right. Sorry. Yeah.
Thanks, Joe. I'll just comment on that point, if I may. So the reason why it says that about company representatives not expected to be questioned by scrutiny is really because when I looked at the guidance from the Centre for Public Scrutiny, it set out a rather different approach to scrutinising companies and commercial ventures from the traditional approach, which focuses on accountability. So what the guidance says is that, well, I'll just read it to you. So scrutiny around these arrangements has tended to focus on the question, how do we hold these structures or organisations to account? So it's talking about the companies there. This is what we call institutional accountability, focusing on the governance, priorities and work of a particular organisation. This is problematic in this case in two ways. Firstly, such attempts at scrutiny may duplicate existing governance processes. So in the case of companies, they may replicate what happens in board meetings, where, for example, you have non-execs who are there to hold the company directors to account, and work undertaken by the executive itself in holding the company to account for delivering the objectives that it's set. And then the second problem is activity which councillors may wish to scrutinise may be restricted for reasons of commercial confidentiality. And that's a point that's already picked up. So what the best practice guidance recommends is it's more likely to be productive if scrutiny focuses on outcomes for local people, outcomes to which these bodies and organisations contribute, and it recommends 4 steps. First one is taking action to inform how the council develops its overall approach to these commercial arrangements. The second one is testing your understanding of local people's needs. Third one is designing governance into the new systems and making a contribution towards how that governance is set up in the organisation. And then finally, ensuring that members have the rights to access information in a way that engages with their roles. So that is the reason why my expectation was that we wouldn't necessarily have the representatives from the companies, because it's a different type of approach to scrutiny. Having said that, I understand entirely that scrutiny may wish to take evidence from whoever it likes, and if that's from the council company, then that's fine.
Mr. Charlie.
Yeah, thank you. I didn't actually get an answer to my question about the appendix line and the fact that in the governance line there, and also the red boxes are the company's input into the governance, and the governance itself is actually the purple boxes. Is that as a scrutiny body, we should be scrutinising down to shareholder operations board level, and let's say that we're only scrutinising the cabinet in the cases of because we've already done that. We've scrutinised future places. One of the first actions of this or the predecessor version of this this committee board is that we are going to, where we've got one line at the moment, it indicates that, well, the BCP council scrutiny is only scrutinising cabinet, when we don't. We scrutinise further down as a board, and that gets amended if that is correct. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we've had a pretty good thrashing of this now, so I'm just going to make a couple of comments and questions, and then we'll come on to the proposal that Sue's come up with. The first point is I'm really pleased that you've described the changes that you're going to make to the paper for cabinet, because my first impression when I read this was, how can we decide what our governance arrangements should be when we don't understand the purposes for which the companies were established in the first place? And for me, that was a big gap in this paper, because unless you understand why you've created the company and then on what basis and how you will operate it within with the council, it's very difficult to decide how you're going to construct the governance arrangements. And I believe, and I agree completely with the council cabinet, that it's not a one-size-fits-all process here. And it brings me to the issue about tech-old companies, which nobody's mentioned so far, because if you've got a single council shareholder, then the rules are different compared with a private limited company, and the responsibilities and the way in which it's governed. Now, the majority of companies that we have at the moment are actually tech-old companies, because we look at Seascape and BBML. I accept that, and actually those companies were actually operating for a long time fairly satisfactorily, subject to scrutiny. There was nothing confidential. The scrutiny and has scrutinised it over a long period without too many difficulties, as far as I'm aware. So those have been functioning and have been subject to democratic process of work. So my reaction to the papers is this a knee-jerk reaction to the problems that we've had with future places. So we feel that we've got to construct now a system to overcome those kind of issues, when actually there's maybe not a need to in some areas, because the systems are working fairly well. But I do understand the principle. If you set up a system, then it ought to necessarily apply to the others. So coming onto the system itself then, and I looked at it, I thought, well, actually, are these limited companies at all? Or are they companies in their own right? Because actually, the council is requiring to approve all the business plans and all the rest of it for it. Now, I understand why you would want to do that, but equally a company should be constructing its business plan to suit the contract that it's got with whoever it's its customer. And that's the driving factor behind most commercial arrangements. You don't generally set a business plan and then agree it with your customer. Generally, you place an order on somebody and you construct a business plan to see how you're going to deliver it. So when we're talking about companies here, we're talking about the council having its own processes and procedures for approving the business plan. It sounds to me like it's not even a company operating here. It sounds to me like it's just another department of the council. And that's effectively what you've got with a tech or company. So I think we've really got to look, it's not a one size fits all situation here. I do accept that where you've got other arrangements, for example, on a limited partnership, for example, with the BDC, it's very different because when you start then operating on a daily basis with a very experienced commercial organisation like that, it's a completely different kettle of fish. And actually, what we were trying, I think, with Future Places was to do was to bring in the commercialisation associated with those kind of organisations, but at the same time try to exercise control. So we may, in fact, I think we probably felt that we wanted them to operate independently and separately, even though they were wholly owned by the council as a single shareholder. We actually operate other models, for example, with Tricuro, where we have an executive governance committee, which looks out over the company, and you have, in this case, 2 shareholders currently. And that the executive shareholder group works pretty well with the company, and it seems to, hold it to account. So, I'm not saying it's perfect, but looking at Sue, I can see she's got some issues with that. But so I'm not sure that this paper does give us all the answers. I think it does introduce an element of bureaucracy. And in fact, when you look at some of the various committees, it's almost the same thing. I can see it morphing into one meeting, not 2 separate ones. It's going to be the same thing. The next point is our capacity as an organisation to manage these processes. Even for some of the requirements of annual business plans for the companies that we've been talking about, they have not been coming through. They have not been coming through year after year. I can quote you a couple of them where we've been waiting for years for them. I also question the ability of the organisation to feed the required information to members when it's requested. I have had a nightmare trying to get information about some of the regeneration projects from some of the companies that we've worked. So, it sounds great on paper. Implementing it in practice is a very different situation. And it also requires the skills and understanding with the commissioning side of the business and to be able to understand what's going on in those companies. It's very, very difficult. So the last point I'd like to come to is about overview and scrutiny. The overview and scrutiny has got legal rights to be independent, and that's what it needs to be. You cannot suggest what the ONS process should be. The ONS will decide for itself what it needs to do. It will go wherever it wants to. And when I saw the list in the chain of the governance arrangements, I could see that you could go in at any particular level when the need arose. And in particular, if it's a tackle company, there is absolutely no reason why you couldn't get all the directors in front of the overview scrutiny if that's what you felt was necessary. And it has a legal power to do that. So, we should not be constraining ONS. We should be trying to promote it in that regard. I think I've probably said enough. Do you want to come on to your motion now then, Sue? Thank you.
Yes. Did you get what it was? Do you want me to? So I've got
3 points.
the three points I've got are so the first one was when taking into account the benefits of different ways of providing these services, it should not only consider the cost benefits but also the benefit to residents. The second one was to take into account the level of transparency with whatever model is decided. And the third one being that the company's aims should be aligned with the council's aims and strategies.
Yeah, so the second one, it was the and transparency.
Okay.
So that this was ideas for things that should be taken into account when you're reviewing whether this company structure is the right one to go forward with.
Has got anybody who wants to second that? Councillor Moore wants to second that. Okay, so
Same
yeah, please do.
yes, well,
basically, I think I won't say look at it because I did speak on it before. I think it's very important that we do a very serious review as to whether this is the right way to do it, and then not just in terms of whether we should have a company or not, but if we have a company that's wholly owned by the council, how we operate with it and how we contract with it, but also to compare the difference between having a company or actually just bringing it in-house, and to take all of those things into account, make really from the point of view of what's good for our residents. As I've mentioned in the first one, what benefits residents, what residents want is accountability and transparency. And I think that if we don't have a clear way to ensure that the aims of any third party we work with are aligned with ours, then we're asking for the kind of trouble that we have with these sort of things.
You actually got, sorry. Oh, Councillor Broadhead, sorry.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chair. I mean, first of all, from the off, just to say it's hard to disagree with any of the points in that recommendation. And it goes back actually to Councillor Canavan's point around, would you not have done this the other way around? Looked at the companies and whether they, particularly new administration, are they achieving what you want to achieve? Is it the right mechanism? And then perhaps more individually look at the governance arrangements. But, I suppose where we've got this paper in front of us. The only criticism I would have of each of those recommendations, none of them are actually dealing with governance. So I think they're all a little bit about that second piece. As the leader said, she committed that the next piece of work will be, a comprehensive look, and portfolio holder said as well. So I think there'd be very good proposals for that piece of work. But the paper we've got in front of us is around the shareholder governance review and how you actually, in that steady state environment up to that piece of work, do the governance of these companies. I mean, could be an argument that you might just say don't change anything until that bigger review is done, but it doesn't seem to be the spirit of what the administration is wanting to do, and get this done quickly. So that would be my point. Great recommendation, but not actually about the governance issues.
I can always make another one afterwards.
Councillor Tarling.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with Councillor Broadhead 100%. I agree with a lot of what Councillor Aikenhead has said about the benefits, purpose to the wider community, and the purpose of the company. That sits outside of this paper. Strictly speaking, this paper, as Councillor Broadhead said, is about governance and how we govern and have oversight of what is happening with the companies we've got. The purpose behind those companies is yes, very laudable and a point for discussion, but that's not what this paper is about. You did make a comment about, and to some extent, it sounds like you're trying to unwind some of what we did with Future Places. And on the first or second meeting where we discussed Future Places, I'm a new councillor. I was appointed in May, or became a member in May. And as I made clear in the meeting, I was actually interviewed by Future Places. And it was brought to your attention by a councillor that I'd been interviewed before I was member of this council, and that they were actually an observer at the board meeting where my appointment was discussed, which does bring into the point that Mr. O'Donnell has just made about political interference in a private company. I'll let you know, I was actually so incensed at that, I did actually think about taking legal action against Future Places. But luckily, I was on the panel that also voted to shut down Future Places. So I thought, what do I do? Do I try and sue the council that I'm a member of, or do I just try to put things right? So that was a very key part of putting things right. I wouldn't want to go back and put back in the mechanisms in places that caused an incident like that to happen. So I don't support that part of it. I definitely applaud what you say about the benefits to the community, and each company has to have its own purpose. But I'm going to go back to what Councillor Broadhead says, that this is about the governance, not the aims and the wider remits of these companies. Thank you.
Just answer that, because I believe that it is relevant to the report, because at the beginning, Councillor Hannah made it very clear that he was adding a point to the report that was going to go to the Cabinet to recommend that we review. And what I'm doing is suggesting things for that review. So I'm not saying this is the only thing that we can put forward. If other people have things they want to put forward about the detail of this as well, that's absolutely fine. But I believe the things that I'm putting forward are not, they are actually relevant to this report because of the bit that Councillor Hannah added at the beginning. And I didn't realise he was going to add it. But I was going to actually suggest it myself, which is why I was prepared to speak on it.
Chair, if I may.
Please, thank you.
Just to confirm what's just been said, and to apologise for any misunderstanding in terms of what the intention is. It's not a two-stage process that is intended to take place. It's not a case of looking at the governance issues and subsequently looking at the business case for each. And the wording that is currently drafted that I propose to bring to Cabinet notes that the review of council companies will also consider in each case, so it's simultaneous work, whether the original reason for establishing the company still applies, and appraise the future options for delivering the function performed by the company. So it could well be that that review will lead us to feel that no, the company is no longer needed. It could well be that that review will cause us to feel that the company is highly valued, but the governance arrangements need to be changed in the following way. That all remains to be seen, but it's going to be one exercise in the case of each company. It's not going to be a two-stage process. Where there was reference to a second stage, that was with reference to other forms of companies such as charities, associations, etc. So in terms of the recommendation, I don't think it's for me to comment specifically as to whether the committee should agree with the recommendation or not. But what I can say is I greatly value the contributions that have been made in discussion this evening, and I will be discussing with Ian ways in which we might further modify the draft recommendation that I have ready for Cabinet for Wednesday. Thank you.
I mean, when I look back at the recommendation here, what we're required to do is to report the committee's views to the Cabinet. Well, that can be done. I can actually give a summary of the views that have been expressed here tonight, and put those to Cabinet. I would do that anyway, and I think that there's nothing that's been said tonight. I don't think that we would be happy to actually be reported to Cabinet. So if that's a way forward for this, and I will consult with the Vice Chair on that. So if you're happy for me to do that, then I can do that without us taking any more.
Go forward with it.
Yeah. Okay. So I think that's a reasonable way forward on that. Yeah, Councillor Slade.
We need nameplates today, don't we, Chair? We all need nameplates today. There's that pause between Councillor. I wonder whether there's and again, this is reporting views as opposed to the formal recommendation, because it is a difficult one. This isn't a cabinet paper that's coming here to be amended. This is your paper, and then in 2 days' time we've got the updated paper, so it's tricky. But in terms of Councillor Aikenhead's second point, taking into account accountability and transparency, and then feeding that on to your desire to be able to call anyone you like, whenever you like, for whatever purpose. And frankly, I agree with you. You have that right to call Joe Blogs off the street if you want to, but they come or not, it's up to them. But I wonder whether, in noting that second point on accountability and transparency, it allows us to say, in doing that review, actually there is a job to consider what is the role of the councillor outside of the former shareholder governance arrangement to speak to the company, because there are opportunities and times where it is wholly appropriate for people who work for our existing companies to talk to members in a different capacity. I mean, if we look at the Future Places team that we've had, or we look at the BDC team that we've got, or even, you know, BBML or whatever, there are times when members will talk to the staff of those companies because there's a project in their ward, or because there's a master plan coming up or something. So we do need to understand where is the formal governance shareholder arrangement, but where is the wider role of the councillor in terms of accountability and transparency. So I think that we can do both in terms of saying that that is a model to look to, and if we move to, if we test against the model, but actually there are other roles for councillors outside of the shareholder role. And I think that second point Councillor Aitkenhead raised allows us to take that second bit.
Yeah, I agree with that, leader, and particularly in relation to the portfolio holders, of course, you know, a very key part of that. So, yeah. Anybody else? I just one thought did occur to me, and that was about membership of directors, whether it be members or officers. You know, I do recall instances where officers have had conflicts of interest, and to the point we've had planning decisions taken to appeal because officers have decided that despite 2 refusals by democratically elected committees, that went to appeal against the wishes of a democratically elected planning boards. So, you know, those sorts of things, I remember it so vividly. That's what gives me a little nervousness about the issues about conflicts of interest, because it really can be a very subjective assessment by officers who believe they're operating maybe in the interest of the council in general and general policy, but actually out with something that the democratic side of the council wants to has decided, and that can apply equally to members sitting on a board as it does officers. It can go either way. So it, you know, it's not easy, is it? Okay, so we've agreed then that we will produce a summary of the views expressed on this subject. We'll present those to the cabinet, and of course, you know, they will be looking at a different paper, but nevertheless, I'm sure that cabinet will take note of the debate that we've had, because there's clearly some variances about the, you know, the hard, fast views expressed in this paper. There's still, I think we're probably still undecided and would be for quite some time. But anyway, so we'll leave it at that. Unless anybody else has got any more. All right. Okay, time's done on that one. So we move on next then to agenda item. What is it? Is it 8? Is it the library? Okay. Thank you for that, leader. So for the library, this Councillor Martin is here. Yeah, we were, as you're aware, members scheduled to have a look at the library strategy paper tonight, but for a number of reasons it's not ready, and I'm sure that Councillor Martin will explain why, and it's going to be delayed for a little bit longer. But Councillor Martin did express a wish to come and just discuss the issues around some of the library issues. I'm not sure if we will be getting the paper at the end of January, or whether that's still the situation, or whether it's going to be delayed a little longer. I don't know, but maybe you'll be able to enlighten us on that, because it does actually have a bearing on our next meeting. So I think maybe so we can reflect on that later. So, Councillor Martin, would you like to come up and sit there? And
quite comfortable, thank you.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to, well, thank you for the opportunity to come and update the board on where we are with the strategy. And as you just referenced, I know you were expecting the report to be going to Cabinet this month, and obviously to then therefore to be considering it today. There are a number of reasons why we took the decision just before Christmas to push it back to the February Cabinet. And I'd like to just explain, I think just out of courtesy, just explain to the board the committee why that is the case and why that was the case. I'd like to preface my remarks by saying that I think we can probably all agree that libraries are absolutely central and vital to our communities. And I personally, I feel that they're, given how many sort of community facilities we've lost nationwide over the last couple of decades, I feel that libraries are effectively the last line of defence for our communities in terms of services and what have you. So I think that's really important. And I also think it's, and again, I'm sure I would say this anyway, but I do feel that this is possibly the most, it's certainly one of the most, but in my view, the most important consultation the BCP Council will be doing or has done for some of the reasons I've just outlined. So why have we taken the decision to push it back? Well, the first one is the complexity and scope of the consultation, given how many libraries we've got, given how many stakeholders there are, friends groups, individuals, and many other interested parties. This is an incredibly complex piece of work. So we just felt we needed a little bit more time to get it absolutely right. And I know Matty will be outlining in a few moments the sort of the broad brush of what the consultation will look like. Excuse me. The second factor really is that, as all members will know, we've just been through a consultation process on the proposed savings. That includes some savings from the library service in relation to reduced hours. And by pushing the consultation document back a month, it gives us the opportunity to feed in some of the responses in that consultation into the strategy. And I think that's really important. The third point is, in terms of timing, if a report comes to February Cabinet, the consultation will take place in March and April. I think the whole of March and the first 2 weeks of April. And therefore, that also gives us an opportunity to feed into that process the concerns or issues arising out of the reduced library hours. So I've been contacted by 1 or 2 members already about how that might work, how it's going to work, and all that kind of thing. So I think that's really important to bring that into the process as well. And then the fourth point, and this is something that I would very much welcome members of the committee's views on, not necessarily now, but quite happy to do it now, but perhaps through email or through conversations, is your views on the library service and what sort of questions we should be asking. What should the consultation look like? Obviously, we're a long way down the road on what the consultation is looking like, but your input as councillors who clearly, some of you have libraries in your wards, some of you, I'm sure all of you will be interested in the consultation and taking part in it. So I think feedback from Overview and Scrutiny would be very helpful as we finalise the consultation document. I am hoping that all councillors will take part in the process, not just in terms of the consultation document and the strategy, but actually helping out with maybe focus groups, liaising with friends groups, and things like that. So I think that's also incredibly important. So finally, I'm just, and thanks again, thank you for your time, and thank you. You may want us to come back next month in any case, but for when you have the paper. But I think what we all want to see is a library service that meets the needs of our communities. And I've had the privilege of having been to Camford Heath Library with Sandra, and obviously your own library at Enderby Park, and a number of others already. We want to see a library service that works for our communities, meets the needs of our communities, is modern, to reflect the changing times we're in, and of course is also financially sustainable, given the ongoing challenges that all councils have. So thank you again. I'm happy to take any questions, but in the meantime, I'd also like to pass over to Matty to give an overview of the consultation.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. What's financially sustainable mean when we're talking about libraries? What do you mean by that?
I mean, in the context of financial challenges of the council, we have to have a library service that is. I'm not sure how I can explain it other than financially sustainable. One that works, and one that
Does it mean one that's affordable with our current budget constraints? Is that what you're saying? Thank you. Members, Councillor Tarling, you indicated.
Thank you. Councillor Martin literally just took in his last statement the words out of my mouth, which were obviously my local library, Christchurch, is now or has been converted into a BCP hub. And we're talking about libraries here. To what extent are we talking about community hubs? Are we talking about the library part in that hub? And some buildings, they are merged. With some places, I don't believe they are fully merged. And is part of that strategy needs to reflect both functions, and we need to have that quite clearly defined as to which libraries are hubs, which ones aren't, and the functions that they are going to have going forward. And I would like to see that in that consultation document that we have a matrix of each library and a list as to what they offer. Can you borrow books, DVDs, audio books? Can you talk about housing benefit? Can you get a referral to citizens advice? Can you macrame? Can you do yoga and all the other things that you can and can't do in the library? Thank you.
I can't do either of those, thank you. No, sorry, Councillor Tarling. Any other members? Yeah, sorry, go on.
I think Councillor Tarling will be pleased that all the things that he said will be looked at and assessed in the consultation.
Councillor Goodall.
I just wanted to say the first bit of advice I ever had as a councillor was in my local library at Parkstone, and they said by the time people get to you at your surgery, they just want somebody to shout at, which was not entirely true. But for me, the librarian was wise beyond her years, and they are the first line of information brokers for councillors, for people who are lonely, angry, seeking information, and when they may not be online. And one of the agreements I did make with the librarian was that if they had any problems and people came in with problems, they would let us know. So they're absolutely vitally important, and they treated us with great kindness, and I appreciate the monthly meetings we have there.
Thank you,
Chairman, if I may, I think the Councillor Goodall has helped me with one of my slogans. I said that I believe libraries to be the last line of defence, so they're the first point of information and the last line of defence. And I think I'm sort of straying off a little bit here, but when you look at how vital the role of libraries has been in the pandemic and in that cost of living crisis, I think we can all agree they are absolutely central to our communities.
Thank you. Councillor Hilliard.
Thank you, Chair. Just obviously thinking about the people I've seen at the library using the computers and just the general information, the newspapers, whatever, I would recommend that the consultation is predominantly either paper-based or handheld at libraries to particularly keep a group who use the libraries. I think if we're just using online, that isn't the people who use the libraries, and that's not the people we want to actually respond. So it's focusing on the actual library, big displays at the library, and get the people as they come through the door to fill out the consultation. Thanks.
I think you'll be reassured by Matty's outlining of the consultation strategy.
Thank you, Councillor. I mean, just as a throwaway comment, I mean, the recent consultation that we had on, proposed council savings and things like that, I got a lot of negative feedback from people in the libraries in particular, the complexity of them and the length of them, the numbers of questions, and a lot of what obviously didn't seem relevant to the consultation was in there. And I just wondered how much that had actually limited the consultation. And I hope we can really study this particular consultation to keep it focused and pertinent to residents. That's all I'm saying. Thank you.
You've got Councillor, but I think the officer still isn't to say.
Oh, sorry. Oh, sorry. Matty Roslip, thank you. Sorry, I missed you.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to put a bit of flesh on the bones in relation to how we're going to approach the consultation. So we haven't got the consultation fully ready yet. There's quite a bit of work that needs to take place involving our consultation colleagues to make sure that it's done in a way that is the most robust way possible, and that we can get the best kind of information out of the back of it. And as Councillor Martin said, Cabinet felt that a bit more detail, a bit more flesh on the bones as part of the report would be really valuable. So that's what we're kind of doing. And I just wanted to draw your attention to two kind of broad areas that we're trying to tackle in relation to that. And the first is the methodology, how we're going to do it. And I take the point around it, if we just push out a digital, an online survey, we're not necessarily capturing either the people that currently use the library or indeed some of those that don't, and they're all important in different ways. So we will be looking at consulting with adults, of which there are many that use our libraries, children, of which there are many that use our libraries in different places, and also with the stakeholders that might use our libraries at the moment. So we do have partners of all sorts of organisations, that community groups, the NHS. There's all sorts of different stakeholders that currently use some of our libraries, but it's a mixed picture across the board. Staff, different services use our libraries because it's a great way to get to local people, and they do some of their work through our libraries as well. But we kind of think that there's potentially a lot more. So face-to-face workshops as well as other methods will be woven into this, so that we ensure that we get to not just those that are kind of already staunch supporters of the library service, whose views are very valuable, but also that those that might use them more if they were offered in a different way. And in terms of the themes, in terms of the questions, I'm not going to go into the detailed questions yet because we're still kind of working on that. But there's things around current usage in terms of how many people use them, where they've come from, how they've travelled to get there, because travel distance is how people move around, really important stuff. What they value most about their library or the libraries, and that would be different across all the different sites. Online services, to what extent they use them, to what extent they meet their particular needs. We have young people that use our computers in our libraries to do homework and all sorts of other things, and there's adults that also use them as their only way into digital services. How can we develop that further? Activities and events, there's already a lot of activities and events that take place in our libraries, and the people that go to those, whether it's mothers with their young children or any number of other groups, we're really interested in their views on how the libraries work as well, and to lead us to what we might think the future opportunities might look like. And if we think about what efficiency looks like and value for money, it's looking at different mechanisms for how we operate services within our libraries as well. So not just looking at the current model, there's lots of models all over the country where libraries are done slightly differently according to the place they are and the services that their communities wish to see. Opening hours, whilst we're doing a piece of work at the moment which is relating to the immediate financial pressures, the future is about how do we maximise the opportunities for people to use their libraries at different times. So we'll touch again on opening hours. In fact, and lastly, just that the non-user part, the people that we're not currently reaching. How do we, in the consultation, reach them? So it's not just going to the people that are already see our libraries as a valuable resource. So that's kind of an outline. We've got to flesh that out so that when we finally come to do the consultation in the timescale that Councillor Martin's referred to, we're covering all the bases and that we feel it's a comprehensive and robust process. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. That was very useful. And Councillor Trent, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I totally agree with Councillor Hilliard's point about the consultation must involve in-person bits of paper and so on. I think people need to be able to engage in it, whatever their inclinations are and whatever sort of technology they have or haven't got at hand. The other thing which comes back to me, every consultation we've carried out since something like 2015 or 2016, us and the preceding councils, I've had the same comment back from people. Oh, they're trying to get you to give the answers that the council want to hear. There's a lot of suspicion about it, and I do think that the consultation should have a genuine, we want to know what you feel about it. And I think it would be useful to have different types of consultation. And the other thing is, going back to the bits of paper, if there was a consultation document, they don't actually cost a fortune to produce. It depends how many you do, but certainly, you know, I've dug in my own pocket and paid for leaflets and things like that in the past. They're not horrendously expensive, but you have a resource available to you, and that's the councillors. And I'm pretty certain that most of us would distribute questionnaires to parts of our community, if not all of our community, but that's another, you know, that's a tall order for a lot of people. But I do think that we are a resource that can actually help in the consultation process. So yeah, it's just an appeal for something other than just a digital tick box exercise. I think the last one I did was better, but not particularly satisfying nevertheless, but also, you know, to use what help's available.
Thank you. I know, Andy, you wanted to come back, and then we've got Councillor Rice and now Councillor Dove. So thank you, Andy.
Thank you, Chairman. I just wanted to Councillor Trent touched on what I was going to say, and I just wanted to reinforce what I said at the beginning, that I think it would be really brilliant if all 76 councillors were part of this process in the libraries, where in their wards or with community groups. If you haven't got a library in your ward, then working and consulting and encouraging community groups and individuals to take part in the process. We can all play a really key part in this, in making this a consultation that's really, really meaningful and is out in the community rather than just online. And I think that's absolutely fundamental, and I see that as essential to that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Rice.
Hello, yes, thank you. Just a few points. I was wondering whether the social value of libraries is being calculated in any way, sort of putting a financial value on the social value of libraries. Some of the librarians were asking me when I last went in, what benefits have I had from the library? And one of the things that I used to go to was the baby singing group 8 years ago, and out of that came one of my best friends. And the librarians wouldn't have known about that, and it's not recorded anywhere. But that type of thing is just so powerful for a community. And so I would like to see if there is a way of valuing that type of thing that goes on in the library all the time. The other thing was with regards to librarians promoting the consultation, there seemed to be a little bit of confusion about librarians being allowed to promote the consultation. So if that could just be clarified with the librarian team, that would be great. Because obviously, well, I personally think they should be enthusing about libraries, but and then the other comment was in terms of the questions, a question, an open-ended question about saying something like, if money was no problem, what would you love to see in your library? That type of question, so that it gets the imagination going and may give us some good ideas. And then the final point was about consultation. Yes, I would absolutely love to hear from people that don't normally use the libraries and what would make them start using a library. And I was just wondering whether a randomized survey could be done. It does cost a little bit extra, but it would be really interesting to see what their results are compared with all the other types of consultation that requires that isn't randomized. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Rice. And I think probably I would invite Matty probably to answer some of those, if that's all right. Apart from maybe question 3 about the hypothetical question about if we had unlimited resources, what was it? Yeah, of course. Well, I think we should ask Councillor Martin that one.
But in relation to that, whilst we might not word it in quite that way, I think one of the questions would be, what do people want to see in their libraries? It doesn't mean we can necessarily deliver everything that everybody might want, but it is about the art of the possible and think reinventing our libraries to some extent. And to do that, we have to hear what people would love to see and love to do in our libraries. In relation to the promotion of the consultation, I think there's a distinction between promoting the consultation, encouraging people to participate, and in promoting a particular answer or a particular. We want our staff to make the consultation very available to everybody, but leave people to then answer the questions and be engaged in the right way. As I said earlier, we'll be doing face-to-face sessions as well, so it won't just be a paper survey. I think there's different ways to engage with people, so hopefully that will also give people the opportunity to get involved. So I think that's the questions. I think I've answered them.
A question about how can we put a value on the social benefit derived from the library usage?
I'm not aware immediately of any specific work in that regard, but it wouldn't surprise me if it existed. So we certainly can explore that through the DCMS, who are the governing body for the library service. And it would be interesting. Certainly, we will be looking at the value of libraries beyond the sort of traditional perspective of just books, because they're already places where you get a diverse range of support and services. So that we most definitely are taking that broader view.
Well, apart from the other question that we were going to ask Councillor Martin to answer, but I think you've probably covered it. Fizz, is there anything you want to come back on?
Yeah, I did just want to say that regarding the question about what would you love to see happen, I just would like to re-emphasize that it's a really powerful question, and most people realize it won't happen, but it really, like from my experience, when you ask people, oh, what would you like to see happen, they can't think of anything because they know that the council has no money. So it really does require a permission to dream. So I would highly recommend experimenting with that. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Councillor Felt, thank you.
Thank you. I think throughout this whole evening we've heard about process and timelines and things being upside down and back to front and inside out, and perhaps the wrong thing comes before the other. And part of that is our budget setting versus this consultation. And of course, we can ask people what they, and I think Councillor Trent put it beautifully, we generally want to know how they feel and what they'd like to see. And of course we do, but the budget's already been set. So I think this one's actually to the portfolio holder. I think you're going to hit a dichotomy and you're going to have a balance to reach. But what will you push for
in terms of the communities, and we have a very varied range of communities. What we push for and advocate the most, what the communities want to see happening in their libraries, or we compromise on a watered down version due to a predetermined budget?
Thank you for that question. I think I've made my personal position clear about how I value libraries. And I thought a lot about the consultation process and the question, the issue that Councillor Rice raised about the questions we should ask. I wrote about just before Christmas, I wrote a list of 25 questions, and I did it from the perspective of being a resident rather than a councillor. And at the very top, I put the first questions: what would you like to see happen in your libraries? So obviously, you're quite right. There is a financial imperative. There's a financial context to all this, as there is with everything. We're all aware of that. Personally, I would, if you're asking me what my personal view is, it is that I would advocate for the best library service that we can achieve that meets the needs of the community, and in my view that must come first. But clearly there are financial implications to everything the council does. But I don't think I've let in any doubt as to how strongly I feel about the library service, and how I see it at the heart of our communities now and, you know, in 5 years, 10 years time. Not sure if that answers your question, but it's a difficult one.
It's a little hard when you don't know the costs and overspend of what you'd like to deliver versus the budget you have, and it could be 100,000, it could be 1 million. So it's a little bit difficult to answer, and I understand. Sorry, Chair, through you. So I do understand it's a difficult one to answer. I think it was about trying to understand, as a portfolio holder, what you're going to be pushing for and advocating for. I'd really like, though, if that's okay, to understand social value and how you're going to measure that, and that's slightly different to the number of activities that are offered. And I say that as a mum who loved wiggle and rhyme and all the rest of it, so I'd still go if I could.
Yeah, social value. Yeah, it's a good question. Is that for you, Andy, or Matty?
Well, I think it links to the previous question about social value, and I think that it's a difficult challenge, isn't it? To what we want to do is go beyond just looking at the traditional ways we measure the service and just looking at the money. The money is really important, but what all the other things that our library service can do. I think it was mentioned earlier around not just the library service, in fact, but all our other buildings in the conurbation that are delivering services. You know, they've got staff are occupying them, services are occupying them. How can we think about the whole picture, not even just the library service as well? So there's lots of different dimensions, but I think the social value thing overall is probably one of the challenges, but we will do our best to reflect the full breadth of what our library service can offer.
Thank you, and I appreciate that. What I don't want to have happen, and I think hopefully Councillor Martin you'll agree, is we place a value on the numbers of people that use that one service, and we understand our census data now that we've sort of correlated and computed it all, in terms of there might be some minority groups, and I don't just mean race, but across the, you know, our whole equalities piece, for which it may not be the most subscribed service, but may add the most value to those most vulnerable people. You don't have to answer that, but that's where I place that measurement social value.
Can I just respond to that, Chairman? Just to say that
it's a very good point, actually.
That it is, you know, I completely agree. This is not a numbers game. It's not how many people use it. It's about which goes back to the point of how important it is that we have as many people as possible involved in this consultation, from a little group here to a big group there. You know, every in my estimation, everybody's view, everybody's perspective is going to be important in this, whatever their group is and wherever they are. It's not. Okay. Thank you.
Are you with us, councillor Kavanagh?
Yeah, sorry, Chair, I lost I lost the connection. It's Canavan, by the way. I first of all just want to flag up that I am probably the world's greatest cynic when it comes to consultation. But just to follow up on Councillor Dove's point, irrespective of how important it is or how much we want to hear what the public would really like to see with our library service, at the end of the day, the budget is going to give Councillor Martin and the administration a bottom line figure on how much the budget is for the library service. So whatever the public want, it has to be deliverable within that amount of money. And that's the part of the equation that to me is missing. So Councillor Dove's right. Against we're approaching this, in my view, in the wrong way. We're asking people what they want in a situation when we know perfectly well that we're not going to be able to deliver it all because the money is just not going to be there to do it. So I think there has to be some candor on the part of the administration with the public about what it is we can afford, because I could write 25 things about what I would like to see in my library, but the chances of being able to achieve them all are frankly zero. So I think we just need to be a bit more realistic with the public about managing expectations, because I think we're in danger of leading them down the garden path, if I can put it as bluntly as that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Martin, did you want to come back on that?
I mean, I think what Councillor Canavan said about the library service probably applies to every single service the council delivers. So, and there is clearly there is an issue about managing expectations, but I think we should try and approach it from a positive point of view. I think we want to encourage as many people as possible to take part in the consultation. So I wouldn't like to put people off by sort of doing a bit of shroud waving too early, and because people will think, well, what's the point? So I think we need to take an optimistic view about what we can achieve, not only in terms of just the library service itself, but also, as has been referenced by Matty and others, this is part of a much bigger piece of work about what the council is going to look like in future and what services are located where, and all that kind of thing, co-location and community hubs. So, it's much more of a complex issue than just about the library service. So I think I would prefer to be a bit more optimistic about the future and go into the consultation in that spirit. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Martin. Nice to have a bit of optimism. Brilliant. I think we've probably thrashed this one to death now. And so if there's nobody else who wants to say anything else, I think we'll close this item down. I think it's been quite an interesting, useful debate. And we look forward to receiving the strategy paper for our next meeting. If that does change, can you let me know as soon as possible, please? Because I do have a scheduling issue for the next meeting. So we'll close that down. Thank you very much, and move on to the next agenda item, which is about the ONS full plan, I believe. Not the full plan, I beg your pardon. The scrutiny action plan. Scrutiny action plan. And I won't say anything about that. I'll let Lindsay introduce the paper. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Thanks for asking for this update to come to you. It's helpful to have this monitored. I'll keep it fairly brief because I think that the report is quite clear and the action plan is quite detailed. But just to remind you that the action plan was approved by Council in September last year. In many ways, it contains a lot of actions that would ordinarily be done as operational actions, but the purpose of the action plan is to set out where we are upholding or what action we are taking to uphold the statutory guidance for overview and scrutiny. So that's why it's very detailed and it has the relevant paragraphs of the guidance set out there. So I think it's helpful to be able to monitor all in one place what progress we're making strategically across the whole overview and scrutiny function to uphold that guidance. In addition, at the time the action plan was produced, there was assurance review activity taking place. And so that is also captured within there, and specific actions that related to overview and scrutiny, and our progress against those. And it's good that actually many of those actions that were picked out through the assurance review action plan had already been identified within the statutory guidance actions. So there's a crossover there, and that's set out within the action plan. At paragraph 7 within the report, there is an overview of progress against actions. So currently we have 45% of the actions completed, which is an increase of 16% since September. 25% are on target to complete as planned, 30% have experienced some delay. And of those that have experienced some delay, 56% of those are in progress. So that's a broad overview for you. Excuse me. I think it's clear in the report as well that the capacity to progress the action plan comes from within the Democratic Services team on the whole, and the resources to support overview and scrutiny are spread across the whole function, the servicing of meetings and strategic improvements as set out in the action plan. So clearly where there's other activity, such as an increase in meetings or special meetings, that's going to affect the pace of progress of the action plan. That has happened to date and has created some of the delay to some actions. And that will continue to be the basis as we draw resource appropriately to support functions within overview and scrutiny, of which the core functions must take priority. I would just flag, I've given a sort of highlights at paragraphs 10 and 11 of some of the key areas. I think we've seen some really good improvements. It is particularly notable, I think, that the actions identified through the assurance review activity and captured within that action plan for the assurance reviews are being met really well, or work towards them is going well. So there is good work ongoing around diversification of work programs for overview and scrutiny. We're moving away from pure cabinet scrutiny, which you'll be aware of. We're very in the thick of things with workshops for your committee. So that's good progress. There's more use of performance information and data and evidence. There's been a good focus on medium-term financial planning, and some key areas for the council, such as council-owned companies, as we've been discussing tonight, transformation, and culturally as well. I think it's very important to note that we're seeing some really good progress, I think, since the May elections around improvements there. So the tone in ONS meetings across the board is less adversarial. There's good balance of questionings between councillors and officers to bring evidence in. And behind the scenes, as you'll know, members, there is good work going on. And that's really important, the relationship building between the leadership of the council and the lead officers, to ensure that overview and scrutiny can focus in the right places. And that's a huge area of improvement work. And I think we're making good strides culturally in that respect. So those are just a few of the highlights. There's a really detailed commentary, I think, throughout that action plan. But if you've got any specific questions on any actions, I'll endeavour to answer them for you.
Thank you so much, Lizzie. I know you're not feeling particularly well this evening, so I do thank you for joining us. You know, I think you're struggling slightly, aren't you? Don't. So members, any questions? It would appear not. But what I would say is that, I think it's great that we do have this ONS, this plan, and I think we are making good progress. I'm particularly keen that we pursue all of the areas covered by the government and internal assurance reviews. We'll focus on those issues in particular, and I think performance of the council in various areas is a key part of that, and we've yet to decide how that will be taken forward. But it is, in my view, is something that we really do need to focus on, and we hopefully will do that. Anybody else? Okay, it doesn't appear that we have any queries on the plan. It is well written, and it's very clear, sets out clearly what we have achieved, and so I think it's really good progress. And I think we'll bring it back to the board probably in 6 months' time, if not before then. It depends, but we certainly will bring it back again, because it's important that we do measure our own progress against what it is we set out to do. So that's really good. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So we'll move on to the next agenda item, which is agenda item 10, which is actually the forward plans. We do that the one that we have here, unfortunately, is going to change because some of the items have altered, and we're going to have to. I'm going to have to negotiate what's on there with the vice chair, I'm afraid, for the next meeting. Because it does look like one of the items that we had hoped to be presented, which was the 20-mile-an-hour options paper. I don't think it's going to come forward, but we do know that the library strategy paper has moved, and it's likely to be the one that will be added to the agenda. But there are one or two other issues as well going on at the moment. So if you're happy for myself and the chair, vice chair to finalise those arrangements with democratic results. Yeah, okay, thank you, thank you. Okay, so of course then we have our workshops coming forward as well. A lot of work in looking at the forward plan. So if you're happy, we'll leave it at that. And I think, yes, please, yeah, go ahead.
If there's a gap, can we bring Wessex Fields to that gap, please, and have an update as to what's happening, please? Options and appraisals.
Yeah, Wessex Field is on there. We haven't assigned a date to it. Yeah, I'm not sure that we would be able to bring it forward to the end of January anyway at this point.
I believe there's quite some sort of some negotiations which are quite far down the line that nobody yet is really cited on.
Okay.
And I think now would be a really good time to bring it and understand what the council is considering.
Okay, there are a number of actually very important things going on within the council at the moment. That is just one of them. But with that information that you've given me, maybe things are moving faster than I'm certainly aware of. I will certainly take that up and find out, just what is going on there and see if we can add it. But I think it's unlikely that we can add it to the next agenda at the end of January. I think it's unlikely. I don't say no, but let me look into it first, if you don't mind. Okay, I'll do that. All right. We'll close the meeting. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Oh, thank you. I see.